Hi everyone, it's Jeff here. Today I'm going to be demonstrating 3 different methods on edge banding manufactured boards such as melamine, MDF, even plywood, by hand using some basic hand tools that you may find into your garage. The third method that I will be showing today also will be using an advanced method such as a hot melt glue handheld edge bander, but the majority of these edgings you can do inexpensively by hand without the aid of some expensive machines. So hope you enjoy this video and it helps you out. Okay, before we start this video, I'm just going to have a layout here of all the different materials and hand tools, some power tools that I'll be using for this demonstration, edging by hand especially. Most of my trimming of the edge tape is done using just some basic hand tools that you can just purchase from specialty cabinet making suppliers, or even some of this stuff from your local hardware. But firstly, the edge tape. I've got a variety here of probably the 2 main common types of edge tape. The first here is what we call PVC edge tape, 1mm PVC, and that's the most common edge tape that I will use, especially in cabinet making and joinery for kitchens and bathroom cabinets and so on. I recommend using this for your carcasses, doors and so on. However, I do have another one here which is an easier application, and it's called iron-on. It's 0.5 of a millimeter thin, so it's half the thickness of this one, so it's less durable. That's probably the only downfall with this one, but it is easier to apply because it has a pre-glued backing on it, and hence iron-on. We use an iron to apply this edging onto your melamine or MDF or even veneered products and so on. So it is quite easy to use, and I'll show you how to use and apply this edging. With the 1mm PVC edging, one of the applications I'm going to be showing you to do that one is with some contact glue, and here I have just a couple of examples here of a spray contact glue, which is a lot easier to do. You can use your contact glues in a tin and brush the contact glue on, which works fine as well. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to be using these contact glues. Again, these can be bought at your hardware and even cabinet making specialty suppliers and so on, but really easy to use, quick and clean. Some of the hand tools that I do use, things like some snips to cut the edge tape. With 1mm, I tend to use something a little bit more heavy duty than a pair of scissors. With the 0.5 edge tape, you can use some scissors to cut, no problem. I have this, well, I could call this a specialty tool, but this one is a lifesaver. It's a really good tool. It's called an end trimming tool for the edge tape, and what this does, and you'll see in the demonstration, is that it trims the edge flush with your board once you've applied the edge tape on, and a really good tool. That one, I use it all the time. If you don't have one of these, you can use a chisel or a sharp blade to trim the edging flush as well. Okay, so it's not a big deal, but a really good tool to have. To trim the 1mm and even the 0.5mm edging flush with the surface of your board, I use a jointer's knife or blade. It's basically just like a really long chisel. It's 30 centimeters or 300 millimeters. And I use that cutting flush, and you'll see in the demonstration, a very inexpensive tool to get if you do need to get. Again, you could use a chisel, a really sharp wide chisel if you really wanted to as well. I have this trimming tool here, which I'll demonstrate on the 0.5mm. Again, that's from a specialty cabinet making suppliers. It runs one way, and it actually you squeeze it. It has a couple of little blades. you squeeze it and it trims the edge tape flush with the side of your thing, or it might leave it a little bit proud and you can trim it later. But again, you don't have to have one of these. After using that as well, I do use this chamfering tool. If you don't have one of those, you can use a sanding block. That's just a bit of offcut with a bit of sandpaper glued on with that application. Easy. This chamfering tool, I did get this from a specialty cabinet making supplier. They're around about $50 odd. Really good tool, especially for the 1mm application. It leaves a really nice, clean, uniform chamfered edge. So that's something you could work your way up to in getting something like that. But again, it's not a necessity. You can use a sanding block or even a file to chamfer your edges of your edging when you complete. I have an old iron here. I use that to iron on the edging, and I also have a little bit of offcut of just some baking paper that you'll find in your kitchen. I put that on top of the edge tape to prevent it from burning, really, but you're not going to be sitting there for hours or anything ironing, or minutes. It's just a quick run over with the iron to melt that glue, which you'll see in the application. I do have a heat gun, probably one of the only other power tools that I might use, but I will demonstrate the use of this with the 1mm edging. I just use it to quickly heat the edging, just so it softens up a little bit. And the softer that edge tape is, the easier it is going to be to trim off with your knife blade as well. A couple of clamps to hold my board down, but that's basically it as far as basic common hand tools that you can use to edge melamine for yourself at home, instead of going out to buy expensive trimmers and laminate trimmers and so on to clean your edges. You can do it by hand, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So I hope you enjoy this video and you learn something from this. Okay, to start off with, I'm going to measure a piece of edge tape to my length of board. Just make sure that you allow around about 25mm overhang on each end. As you can see here, I'm applying a little bit of baking paper to protect the top face of the 0.5 edging. This won't leave any burn marks on the surface, so make sure to keep the iron flat along your workpiece. As you can see in the demo, I'm gently sliding the iron over the edging and moving slow and steady. Also, when you put your edge tape down onto your board, try to center your edging and keep an equal amount of offcut on both sides, as you can see in the smaller picture. Next, I'm using a little roller to apply a little bit of downward pressure, making sure my edge tape has stuck down adequately. You could also use a small cork block or something like that as well. Next, I'm using my end trimming tool to cut the offcut edge tape flush with the end of my piece of board. Here I'm using this little specialist trimming tool, which is designed for 0.5 edging. Make sure it's used in the direction of the little arrow that's on it. Simply squeeze this together and run it along your workpiece, and this helps trim the bulk off. And in my case, there was a small amount of edging still exposed and not flush, so using the joiner's knife next to clean this flush. When using this tool, the advantage of it being so long is so you can actually have a bit of that blade surface sitting flat on your board, which also acts as a guide. You'll need to keep a bit of downward pressure too when doing this. As you can see, I run this along on an angle, keeping it nice and steady. Once this step is done, you will see me using a sanding block with a fine sandpaper attached in an upward motion, so you don't tear off the edge tape, and this will help clean the corner up. But be careful not to do this too much, as if you do, it'll expose the surface underneath the melamine coating, and that won't look good. Next, for the 1mm demonstration, I'm following the same steps as the previous edging, measuring out and cutting the edge tape to suit. Next, I've laid out my pieces and masked up the edges so the overspray of the spray glue doesn't go everywhere, and just give this a light, even coat. Once these two surfaces are touch dry, carefully place the edging evenly on your piece of board. Then using the roller to place some downward pressure on the edging, helping it to bond and stick down. Next, I'll use my end trimming tool to trim off the offcuts of edging flush with my piece of board. If you don't have one of these, you can use a sharp chisel or even a sharp blade. The next step is finishing off the 1mm edge flush with my board, and because I'm using 1mm now, it's a little bit thicker, and the trick here is using a heat gun, just so it softens that edging a little bit before I use my blade to trim it flush, and this will help the blade cut through a little bit easier. Next, I'm using my little specialist chamfering tool, running it along the edge in a steady motion. If you don't have one of these, you can use a sanding block or even a fine file. Here I'm showing the technique of running that blade along your board, cutting that offcut edge in a slow motion. Now it's just a matter of repeating that process on the other side. One thing you'll notice when I'm using this blade is that I find it easier to work towards myself, pulling the blade rather than trying to use the blade in the opposite direction and try to work out flicking the blade, which can tear the edging away from the board. The final demonstration is using a handheld edge banding machine which uses hot melt glue cartridges that heat up and apply the melted glue to the back of the edge tape while it's being automatically fed in. There are many YouTube videos that demonstrate this machine and similar ones if you're interested in getting one of these. But the method I use for trimming and finishing off the edge tape once this is done is exactly the same as the previous methods that I've shown. Okay, so you've seen now that's the three methods that I use to edge manufactured board products by hand, and you can see that you can achieve some high quality finishes in your own backyard. But my pro tip is you've got to make sure that you have nice, crisp, clean cut edges on your board from your saw. Otherwise, the edging is not going to hide that. Okay, so let me know in your comment section which of the 3 methods that you prefer. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.